I skipped my dream job to stay home with his mom, but at the family barbecue he announced our divorce with a toast. "She's been a great temp," his sister laughed. I clinked my glass, then handed him a package that destroyed his career. The call came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. I remember the exact time because I was staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep after another one of Taylor's emergency work meetings that ran until midnight. His phone buzzed against the nightstand and I watched him fumble for it in the darkness. "Mom fell again," he whispered, his voice thick with panic. "She's in the hospital." I was already reaching for my robe before he finished the sentence. That's who I was then, the woman who moved first, questioned later. The woman who believed that love meant sacrifice and sacrifice meant silence. Before we dive deeper into how I plan my perfect revenge, I want to thank you for being here. If you believe that sacrifice and loyalty deserve better than betrayal, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps us reach more women who need to hear this. Now let's see how this unfolds. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. Taylor's mother, Eleanor, lay in the sterile bed looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Her hip was fractured, but the real damage was deeper. The doctor's gentle explanation about early-stage dementia, about how living alone was no longer safe. "I can't do this," Taylor said, running his hands through his hair as we sat in the waiting room. "The promotion at work, the new project launches. I can't be her caregiver." I reached for his hand, my fingers interlacing with his. "We'll figure it out." "Alex, I can't ask you to." "You're not asking," I interrupted. "I'm offering." The words left my mouth before I could stop them. My architecture firm had just offered me the lead position on their biggest residential project. A sustainable housing development that would have launched my career into the stratosphere. The interview was in 3 days. I'd been preparing for months. But Taylor's eyes were desperate and I'd been raised to believe that family came first. Even when that family wasn't technically mine yet. "Just temporarily," I said, convincing myself as much as him. "Until we find a good care facility or a professional nurse." Temporarily. The word tasted like copper in my mouth now, 3 years later. The first month was manageable. Eleanor was recovering from surgery, and I could work from home on smaller projects while helping with her physical therapy. I made her favorite soup, organized her medications, and drove her to appointments. She called me Taylor's friend most days, but sometimes she'd smile and say, "Thank you, dear." Those small moments of gratitude felt like victories. But as weeks melted into months, my laptop gathered dust. Client calls went unanswered. The architecture firm hired someone else for the lead position. Someone who could commit, they said. Someone who wasn't playing house with their boyfriend's mother. Taylor's work demands increased. He'd leave early, come home late, and spend weekends catching up at the office. I understood. His promotion was important. We needed the money, especially now that I wasn't contributing financially. "You're amazing," he'd tell me, kissing my forehead before rushing out the door. "I don't know what we'd do without you." I lived on those words like they were oxygen. The changes in him were subtle at first. He'd check his phone during dinner, smiling at messages I couldn't see. His work trips became more frequent. Conferences in cities I'd never heard him mention before. When I asked about them, he'd give vague answers about client meetings and networking opportunities. "You're being paranoid," he said one evening when I mentioned how distant he seemed. "I'm working my butt off for our future. Can't you just support me instead of making everything about you?" The accusation stung because it felt partially true. I was making it about me. About the loneliness that crept in during the long days spent managing Eleanor's care. About the dreams I'd shelved without any clear timeline for when I might dust them off. His family gatherings became exercises in endurance. Taylor's sister, Michelle, would arrive with her perfect manicure and designer handbags, making passive-aggressive comments about how convenient it was that I was available to help. "It's like having a live-in nurse," she'd laugh to Taylor. "Except you don't have to pay her." Eleanor would nod along, sometimes forgetting I was in the room. "Taylor's friend is very helpful," she'd say to Michelle. Though I can't remember her name most days. "It's Alex," I'd say quietly. "Alex, right? She's like a temporary helper." Temporary. That word again. Taylor never corrected them. He'd laugh uncomfortably and change the subject, but he never stood up for me. Never acknowledged that I'd put my entire career on hold. Never mentioned that I was his girlfriend of 4 years, not just some random woman who'd wandered into their lives. The breaking point came on a Thursday night in November. I was folding Taylor's laundry, a task that had somehow become mine along with everything else, when I heard him on the phone in the kitchen. "She's useful for now," his voice carried through the thin walls. "But honestly, I don't know how much longer I can keep this up." I stood frozen, a half-folded shirt in my hands. The fabric felt rough against my suddenly numb fingers. I know, he continued. "But the situation at home is complicated. She's been handling everything with Mom and I can't just, well, you understand." There was a pause. Then laughter. Taylor's laughter. "Trust me, I'm working on it." The shirt fell to the floor. I bent to pick it up, my movements mechanical, robotic. Something fundamental had shifted inside me, not broken but hardened. Like water turning to ice. I didn't confront him. Instead, I finished the laundry in silence, folded it perfectly and put it away. Then I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and started writing. November 15th. Taylor on phone, unknown caller, 9:47 p.m. "She's useful for now." The ink looked so ordinary on the page. Just blue lines forming letters, forming words, forming the beginning of the end. I wasn't planning revenge yet. I was planning survival. Because for the first time in 3 years, I realized I'd been living in someone else's story, playing a character I'd never auditioned for. The temporary helper. The useful woman. But useful things, I realized, could be replaced. And temporary things eventually came to an end. Grace's name first floated into our conversations like smoke. Subtle, almost invisible, but impossible to ignore once you noticed it. Taylor would mention her casually over dinner, his fork pausing midair as he'd say, "Grace thinks we should restructure the quarterly reports," or, "Grace has this incredible strategy for client retention." At first I found it endearing. My boyfriend had found a mentor, someone who believed in his potential. Grace Martinez. I learned her full name from Taylor's enthusiastic recounting of her career trajectory. She'd built her consulting firm from nothing, worked 18-hour days, and commanded respect in rooms full of men who'd tried to diminish her. "She's like a machine," Taylor would say, his eyes lighting up in a way that should have been my first warning. "Her mind works 3 steps ahead of everyone else's." I remember telling him how much I'd love to meet her someday. "She sounds incredible. Maybe we could have dinner." Taylor's smile flickered. "She's super busy. Plus work stuff, you know. It might be weird." Weird. The word hung in the air between us, but I let it slide. I was too busy managing Eleanor's medication schedule and physical therapy appointments to dig deeper into what weird might mean. Grace's influence on Taylor became more pronounced as months passed. He'd quote her philosophy on work-life balance. Ironic, considering I hadn't seen him maintain any balance in months. He'd reference her opinions on everything from investment strategies to vacation destinations. "Grace says couples who travel together grow together," he mentioned one evening while scrolling through his phone. She and her ex used to take these amazing trips before things fell apart. Her ex. Even her failed relationships seemed fascinating to him. The day I decided to surprise Taylor with lunch at his office, I'd spent the morning making his favorite sandwich, turkey and avocado on sourdough with that expensive mustard he loved. Eleanor had been particularly difficult that morning, refusing her medication and insisting she didn't need help getting dressed. By the time I'd gotten her settled with her afternoon soap opera, I needed to see Taylor's smile, needed to feel appreciated for something. The elevator ride to the 15th floor felt longer than usual. I checked my reflection in the polished doors, smoothing down my hair and adjusting the lunch bag. When had I started caring so much about my appearance for a simple lunch delivery? Taylor's office had glass walls, a modern design choice that was supposed to promote transparency and collaboration. The irony wasn't lost on me later. I saw them before they saw me. Taylor sat behind his desk, but his chair was angled toward the woman perched on the edge of his desk. She wore a burgundy blazer that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a month, her dark hair pulled back in a perfect chignon. Her laugh was musical, genuine, the kind that made you want to be part of whatever joke had caused it. But it wasn't the laughter that stopped me cold. It was Taylor's hand resting over hers on the desk, his thumb tracing small circles on her knuckles. I knocked on the glass door, watching as they both turned. Taylor's hand jerked away from hers like he'd been burned. "Alex." His voice pitched higher than normal. What are you doing here? The woman, Grace obviously, slid gracefully from the desk, extending her hand toward me with practiced professionalism. You must be Alex. I've heard so much about you. Her handshake was firm, confident. Her eyes were the color of dark chocolate, warm and intelligent. She was beautiful in an effortless way that made me acutely aware of my own hastily applied mascara and the small stain on my sweater from Eleanor's breakfast. I brought lunch, I said, holding up the bag like a peace offering. How thoughtful, Grace said, and I couldn't detect any sarcasm in her tone. Taylor's lucky to have someone who takes such good care of him. The phrase felt loaded with meaning I couldn't quite grasp. 2 weeks later, a package arrived at our house. My name was on the label, written in elegant script that belonged to someone who'd learned proper penmanship. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a bottle of perfume, Chanel No. 5, the classic. The card was simple: thanks for supporting Taylor's grind. Grace. I held the bottle up to the light, watching the amber liquid catch the afternoon sun streaming through our kitchen window. It was thoughtful, expensive, completely inappropriate. But what made my hands shake wasn't the gift itself. It was the scent that wafted up when I removed the cap. I'd smelled it before, lingering on Taylor's coat collar after his late nights at the office. I'd assumed it was from a client meeting, maybe dinner at an upscale restaurant. I set the bottle on the counter and stared at it for a long time. Then I put it in the drawer with the other things I was beginning to collect. Receipts, notes, small inconsistencies that meant nothing individually but formed a pattern when viewed together. That night I opened Taylor's laptop while he showered. His password was still the same, my birthday, which felt like both a comfort and a betrayal. His calendar was synced across all his devices, and Grace's name appeared with startling frequency. Coffee meetings, strategy sessions, dinner consultations that ran well past business hours. I took screenshots. Not because I was ready to confront anything, but because I needed proof that I wasn't losing my mind. The Bluetooth logs on his phone told an even more interesting story. Grace's car had been connected to his phone's system 17 times in the past month. Long drives together, apparently. Places I'd never been mentioned when he recounted his workdays. I learned to navigate his digital life like a forensic accountant, following the paper trail of a relationship I wasn't supposed to know existed. Credit card statements showed charges at restaurants I'd never heard of, hotels in cities where he'd supposedly had solo business trips. The private investigator's name was Marcus, and he specialized in what he called domestic intelligence gathering. His office was in a nondescript building downtown, and he had the kind of forgettable face that probably served him well in his line of work. I need to know what my boyfriend is doing, I told him, sliding a folder across his desk. These are his patterns, his schedule, his habits. Marcus flipped through my notes with professional interest. You've done impressive groundwork. Most people come to me with just suspicions. I don't deal in suspicions anymore. He quoted me a price that made me wince, but I had money saved from before. Back when I'd had a career, back when I'd planned for a future that included my own financial independence. 3 weeks later, Marcus called. I have what you need. The video was time-stamped 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Hotel elevator security footage, grainy but clear enough. Taylor and Grace stepped into the elevator together, maintaining professional distance for exactly 4 seconds. Then her hand was on his chest, his mouth was on hers, and they were kissing with the desperate intensity of people who'd been waiting all day for that moment. I watched it 3 times. On the 3rd viewing, I realized I was smiling. Not because I was happy, but because finally, I had confirmation that I wasn't crazy. That the woman who'd sent me perfume as a thank you gift had been marking her territory all along. That the woman behind the curtain wasn't just pulling strings in Taylor's career. She was pulling him away from me. The smile that had been my companion for weeks never wavered as I watched the security footage one final time. That night, I began planning with the precision of an architect designing a cathedral. Every beam calculated, every angle measured, every potential stress point reinforced. When Taylor burst through the front door 3 days later, practically vibrating with excitement, I was seasoning chicken for dinner. Babe, I got the promotion. He swept me into a hug that lifted my feet off the ground. Senior Vice President. Can you believe it? I let myself be spun around, laughing in all the right places. That's incredible. I'm so proud of you. We should celebrate. Big time. His eyes were bright with success and something else. Relief, maybe. What do you think about hosting a barbecue? This weekend? Get the whole family together. Perfect. The words sang in my mind, but I kept my expression appropriately surprised. This weekend? That's pretty short notice. Come on, you're amazing at this stuff. Besides, it's not like you have anything else going on. The casual cruelty of that statement should have stung, but I'd moved beyond pain. I was operating in a different emotional territory now, one where his words were just data points in my growing file. Of course, I said, reaching up to kiss his cheek. I'll make it perfect. And I would. I spent the next 48 hours in a state of controlled creativity. The guest list was easy. Taylor's parents, his sister Michelle and her husband, a few colleagues from work. And Grace, naturally. She'd been included in family events with increasing frequency, her presence normalized to the point where no one questioned it anymore. The seating arrangement took careful consideration. I placed Grace directly across from Taylor, where she could see his face clearly. Michelle and her husband flanked Taylor's parents, positioned to witness everything. I assigned myself the chair closest to the house, close enough to make my strategic exit when needed. The menu was Taylor's favorites. Grilled chicken with my special marinade, corn salad, those little potatoes he loved. I even made his mother's famous chocolate cake, though she'd never actually taught me the recipe. I'd figured it out through trial and error during the early days of our relationship, back when I'd still believed effort equaled love. The black envelope waited in the kitchen drawer like a loaded weapon. I'd assembled its contents with the methodical care of a prosecutor building a case. Marcus had provided everything. Photographs, audio recordings, financial documents, location data. But the real treasure was something I'd discovered myself. While reviewing the audio files, I'd caught something Marcus had missed. In the background of one recording, Taylor's voice discussing more than just their affair. He was talking numbers, account transfers, ways to clean up the books before the quarterly audit. Grace's embezzlement wasn't a solo operation. It was a duet. I'd spent my own money to verify the financial irregularities, hiring a forensic accountant who confirmed what the recordings suggested. Grace had been siphoning funds from client accounts, and Taylor had been helping her cover the digital trail. Saturday arrived with perfect weather, clear skies, gentle breeze, the kind of day that made you believe in new beginnings. I woke before dawn, not from anxiety but from anticipation. Today was the day I reclaimed my narrative. The guests arrived in predictable order. Taylor's parents first, punctual and formal. Michelle and her husband next, bearing expensive wine and air kisses. The colleagues trickled in throughout the afternoon, men in polo shirts and women in sundresses, all eager to celebrate Taylor's success. Grace arrived last, carrying a bottle of champagne and wearing a yellow dress that made her look like sunshine. She hugged me with apparent warmth, whispering, "Thank you for including me. I know family events are special." "You're practically family," I replied, and meant it in ways she couldn't imagine. The afternoon unfolded like a perfectly orchestrated performance. I played the gracious hostess, ensuring drinks stayed full and conversation flowed. Taylor basked in congratulations, his hand finding Grace's shoulder or arm with increasing frequency. Their touches were brief, professional, but I knew what to look for now. Eleanor, Taylor's mother, was having one of her clearer days. She complimented the food, remembered most names, and even asked about my little architecture hobby. I smiled and deflected the way I'd learned to do. As the sun began to set, Taylor stood up, raising his beer bottle. "I want to say something." The conversations quieted, faces turning expectantly toward him. He looked confident, comfortable, a man who'd finally gotten everything he wanted. "This year has been incredible," he began, his voice carrying across the patio. "The promotion, the new opportunities, the chance to work with amazing people." His eyes found Grace's, lingering just a moment too long. "It's taught me what I really need in life." I felt my pulse steady, my breathing calm. "Here it comes." And unfortunately, Taylor's smile turned apologetic, his gaze finally landing on me. "Alex, you're not it." The words hung in the air like smoke from the grill. Michelle's sharp intake of breath was audible. Eleanor's face crumpled in confusion. Grace's expression remained carefully neutral, but I caught the slight upturn of her lips. "I think it's time we both moved on," Taylor continued, his voice gaining strength. "You've been great, really. But I need a partner who understands ambition, who can match my energy." Michelle's laugh was the sound of breaking glass. About time someone said it. She's been like a temporary nurse around here anyway. Very temporary, Eleanor added, her voice carrying the casual cruelty that old age sometimes permits. I stood up slowly, my wine glass catching the last rays of sunlight. The moment stretched, everyone waiting for tears, for anger, for the scene they expected. Tad, I smiled. You're absolutely right, Taylor. I raised my glass in a mock toast. To new beginnings. The clink of glass against glass was delicate, almost musical. Then I reached into my pocket and withdrew the black envelope. Before we celebrate too much, I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly quiet patio, you'll want to open this. Taylor's confidence flickered. What is it? Consider it a going-away present. He took the envelope with hands that weren't quite steady. As he opened it, I pulled out my phone, scrolling to the audio file I'd queued up hours ago. The first photograph made his face go pale. The second made his hands shake. By the time he reached the financial documents, his breathing had become shallow and rapid. Alex, where did you get this? I pressed play on my phone, turning the volume up high. Grace's voice filled the evening air, breathy and intimate. Taylor, yes, oh God, yes. Michelle's wine glass hit the patio stones with a sharp crack. Eleanor's fork clattered against her plate. The colleagues exchanged glances, some reaching for their phones. But the audio file wasn't finished. Grace's voice faded, replaced by Taylor's own words. We need to move the Henderson account funds by Thursday. Can you adjust the timestamp on the transfer? Make it look like it happened last month. The silence that followed was deafening. Grace's face had gone ashen, her champagne bottle forgotten on the table. The affair was almost disappointing, I said conversationally, as if discussing the weather. But the embezzlement? That was truly creative. Taylor's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Grace started to stand, but I held up my hand. I wouldn't leave just yet. The police should be here soon. Taylor's mouth moved like a fish gasping for air, but no coherent words emerged. Just fragments. Alex, you don't understand, and this isn't what it looks like, and we can work this out. I watched him with the detached fascination of someone observing an animal at the zoo. The man who'd dismissed my concerns as paranoia, who'd called me clingy for asking simple questions, was now drowning in his own panic. How long have you been recording us? Grace's voice cut through Taylor's stammering, sharp and controlled despite the circumstances. Long enough, I replied, my finger hovering over my phone screen. Actually, let me check my messages. I sent a few texts while you were both having your little moment. The first text had gone to David Martinez, Grace's business partner and the company's chief financial officer. The message was simple. You need to see this. Emergency. Grace has been stealing. Attached were 3 of the most damning audio files. The second text went to Detective Sarah Chin, whom I'd met through Marcus. She specialized in white-collar crime and had been very interested in the evidence I'd gathered. It's happening now. 1247 Maple Street. Both suspects present. Taylor's face went from pale to gray. You called the police? I called the appropriate authorities, I corrected. There's a difference. Michelle finally found her voice, though it came out as a strangled whisper. Alex, what the hell is going on? Taylor's been helping his girlfriends steal money from their clients, I explained conversationally. Oh, and they've been sleeping together for months. In case that wasn't clear from the audio. Grace stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the patio stones. This is entrapment. You can't record private conversations without consent. I smiled, pulling out another document from the envelope. Actually, I can. Single-party consent state. I was present for most of these recordings. The ones I wasn't present for? Well, those were obtained through legal surveillance methods by a licensed private investigator. Her confidence cracked slightly. You're bluffing. Am I? I held up my phone again. Would you like me to play the recording from last Tuesday? The one where you specifically mention moving money, with Taylor's help, to avoid the audit. Grace's carefully constructed composure finally shattered. This is a trap. You manipulated this entire situation. I planned it, I agreed. There's a difference between manipulation and preparation. You two gave me plenty of material to work with. Taylor's father, who'd been silent throughout the revelations, cleared his throat. Son, is this true? Dad, I can explain. Is it true? The older man's voice carried decades of authority, the tone he'd probably used when Taylor was a child caught lying about broken windows or stolen cookies. Taylor's shoulders sagged. "It's complicated." "It's really not," I interjected. "Grace steals money. Taylor helps her hide it. They sleep together." The end. Eleanor, who'd been staring at her plate throughout the chaos, finally looked up. Her expression was lucid, focused in a way I hadn't seen in months. "Why would you do this at a family gathering?" The question hung in the air, and for a moment, I felt the weight of every sacrifice I'd made, every dismissive comment I'd endured, every time I'd been treated as invisible. "Because you all treated me like hired help," I said, my voice steady. "For 3 years I put my career on hold to take care of you, Eleanor. I drove you to appointments, managed your medications, cooked your meals, and listened to you forget my name week after week." I reached into my purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Michelle, you called me a temporary helper, and joked about getting free nursing care. Taylor, you told me I had nothing else going on when I questioned your late nights." The paper made a crisp sound as I unfolded it. "So here's my resignation letter, along with an itemized bill for 3 years of unpaid caregiving services." Eleanor took the paper with shaking hands. Her eyes widened as she scanned the numbers. $37,000? "That's below market rate for live-in care," I said. I was generous. Taylor lurched forward. "Alex, you can't be serious. We're family." "No," I said firmly. "We were never family. I was convenient. I was useful. I was temporary." The sound of car doors slamming in the driveway cut through the tension. Blue and red lights painted the fence, casting eerie shadows across the patio. "That would be the cavalry," I said, checking my phone. "Right on time." Grace bolted. She made it 3 steps toward the back gate before her heel caught in the grass, sending her stumbling. She kicked off her shoes and kept running, but the yellow dress made her an easy target against the darkening sky. 2 officers appeared through the side gate, their radios crackling with static. Detective Chin followed behind them, her expression professional but not unsympathetic. "Ms. Rodriguez?" She approached me with measured steps. "We received your information. Are these the individuals in question?" "Taylor Morrison," I said, pointing. "Grace Martinez is the one running toward the back fence." One officer moved to intercept Grace while the other approached Taylor. "Sir, we need to ask you some questions." "This is insane," Taylor protested. "You can't arrest me at my own celebration." "We're not arresting anyone yet," Detective Chin clarified. "We're investigating allegations of financial fraud. You're welcome to cooperate, or you can call a lawyer." Taylor's colleagues had begun a strategic retreat, mumbling excuses about early mornings and babysitters. Michelle and her husband huddled together, whispering urgently. Eleanor still stared at the bill in her hands. The officer at the back fence was escorting Grace back to the patio, her bare feet leaving grass stains on her yellow dress. Her composure had completely evaporated. Her hair had come loose from its perfect style and mascara streaked her cheeks. "I want to call my lawyer," Grace announced. "That's your right," Detective Chin replied. "But we'd like to ask both of you some questions first." As the officers began separating Taylor and Grace for questioning, I found myself oddly detached from the chaos. The panic, the accusations, the desperate attempts to shift blame, it all felt like background noise. I walked back into the house, suddenly aware that I was starving. The kitchen felt peaceful after the turmoil outside. I made myself a plate, chicken, potato salad, a generous helping of the coleslaw I'd spent an hour perfecting. Through the window, I could see Taylor gesticulating wildly at Detective Chin while Grace sat rigidly in a patio chair, her lawyer already on the phone. Eleanor was crying quietly while Michelle tried to comfort her. I took a bite of the chicken. It was perfectly seasoned, tender and juicy. All that careful preparation hadn't been wasted after all. For the first time in 3 years, I ate without worrying about anyone else's needs. I didn't jump up to refill drinks or clear plates. I didn't monitor Eleanor's medication schedule or deflect uncomfortable questions. I just sat at my kitchen island, watched the circus outside through my window and enjoyed my meal. The taste of freedom I discovered was surprisingly satisfying. By morning, my phone had 37 missed calls and over 200 text messages. I turned off all notifications and made myself coffee in the blessed quiet of my kitchen. Outside, the media circus was just beginning, though I didn't know it yet. The first call I actually answered was from Marcus, my private investigator. "Alex, you need to see the news." I turned on the television to find my own face staring back at me from Channel 7's morning show. The headline read, "Local woman exposes cheating husband at family barbecue." They were showing clips. Someone had filmed the entire confrontation and uploaded it to social media. "I didn't release that footage," I told Marcus. "I know. Someone at the party did. It's everywhere. Twitter, TikTok, YouTube. You're trending." By noon the video had 3 million views. The comments section was split between people calling me a hero and others questioning my methods. I read them with detached curiosity, like studying reviews of a movie I'd never seen. The doorbell rang constantly. Reporters, I assumed, though I never answered. I watched from my bedroom window as news vans lined the street. Neighbors I'd barely spoken to in 3 years were giving interviews on my front lawn. Mrs. Peterson from next door told Channel 4, "She was always so quiet. Such a dedicated caregiver." I had no idea what was really going on. Quiet. The word followed me everywhere now. Grace's business began disintegrating within hours. David Martinez, her business partner, released a statement distancing the company from her actions. By Wednesday, 3 major clients had terminated their contracts. By Friday, the company's stock had dropped 60%. I found a perverse satisfaction in watching the financial reports. Grace had built her empire on the premise that she was untouchable, too smart to be caught. Now analysts on business shows were dissecting her downfall with the same clinical precision she'd once applied to other people's failures. She tried to control the narrative through a carefully orchestrated media campaign. Her lawyer arranged interviews where Grace positioned herself as Taylor's victim, claiming he'd manipulated her into the financial crimes. "I was coerced," she told a sympathetic reporter. "He threatened to expose our relationship unless I helped him access client funds. I was afraid for my career, my reputation." Taylor's response came 12 hours later through his own legal team. His statement painted Grace as the mastermind, claiming she'd seduced him into helping her steal money. I watched both interviews from my couch, eating takeout Chinese food and marveling at their shamelessness. They were still performing for each other even now. Still trying to be the smartest person in the room. My phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. Usually I let them go to voicemail, but something made me answer this one. "Is this Alex Rodriguez?" "Who's asking?" "My name is Carmen Valdez. I'm a nurse at Sunset Manor. I work with Eleanor Morrison." My stomach tightened. "Is she okay?" "She's fine physically. But I wanted to call because, well, I saw the video. I've been working with the Morrison family for 6 months now, and I wanted you to know, I never liked how they treated you." The unexpected kindness in her voice made my throat close up. "Thank you for saying that. You deserved better. What you did for that woman, the care you provided, it was professional level work. They should have been grateful." After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen and cried for the first time since everything began. Not from sadness but from relief. Someone had seen my sacrifice. Someone had witnessed my dedication and recognized its value. That afternoon I called my lawyer and added a clause to the divorce proceedings. Half of my settlement would go to the National Caregiving Support Foundation. The irony wasn't lost on me. Taylor's infidelity money would fund resources for people like I'd been. The house sold faster than expected. A young couple with dreams and matching coffee mugs, the kind of people Taylor and I used to be. I signed the papers without sentimentality. Every room held memories I didn't want to keep. My new apartment was 1,200 square feet of possibility. No guest room for elderly relatives. No office space for a husband who worked late. Just me and the sound of waves against the rocks below my balcony. I bought plants. Herbs for cooking, flowers for beauty. I filled a bookshelf with novels I'd abandoned mid-chapter 3 years ago. I set up an easel in the corner by the window, something I hadn't done since college. The drawing started as therapy. Simple sketches of the view from my balcony, studies of light on water. I wasn't trying to create art. I was just trying to remember who I'd been before I became someone's caregiver, someone's betrayed girlfriend, someone's revenge story. 3 weeks into my new life, my college roommate Sarah called. "I shared one of your sketches on Instagram," she said without preamble. "The one you posted of the lighthouse at sunset." "Sarah, I didn't post anything. You sent it to me in a text." Remember? I asked how you were doing and you sent that beautiful drawing with a note about finding peace. I vaguely remembered the text sent late one night when insomnia had driven me to my easel. Anyway, Sarah continued, this gallery owner in Portland saw it and wants to talk to you. Her name is Elena Restrepo. She runs this amazing space downtown. The email arrived that evening, subject line, your work speaks volumes. Elena's message was brief but warm. She'd seen my lighthouse sketch and wanted to discuss including it in an upcoming exhibition called Emergence, Art from Life Transitions. She wasn't offering money or fame, just the chance to be seen as an artist again. I stared at the email for a long time. When was the last time someone had wanted something from me that wasn't about caregiving or sacrifice or making other people's lives easier? I couldn't remember. I crafted my response carefully, professionally, trying to sound like someone who belonged in the art world despite my 3-year absence. But as I typed, I realized I didn't need to pretend. My hiatus from art wasn't a gap in my resume. It was part of my story. The woman who'd drawn that lighthouse wasn't the same person who'd given up her architecture dreams to care for Eleanor Morrison. She was someone who'd learned about dedication, about seeing value in overlooked work, about finding beauty in the spaces between heartbreak and healing. For the first time in years, someone was seeing me not as Taylor's girlfriend or Eleanor's caregiver or Grace's unwitting victim. They were seeing me as Alex, the artist. And that recognition felt like coming home to myself. The gallery opening was on a Thursday evening in October, 6 months after the barbecue that changed everything. I stood in front of my lighthouse sketch, now professionally framed and lit with museum-quality spotlights, watching strangers examine my work with genuine interest. The artist captures something raw here. I overheard a woman in a burgundy coat tell her companion. There's pain but also liberation. Liberation. Yes, that was exactly right. Elena approached with a champagne flute and a smile that reached her eyes. 3 people have asked about purchasing prints. I told them they'd have to speak with you directly. People want to buy my art? The concept still felt surreal. Your art tells a story people recognize, Elena said. Resilience. Transformation. The courage to start over. A young woman approached us, notebook in hand. She introduced herself as a journalist from the Arts Weekly, wanting to interview me about the piece. What inspired this work? She asked, pen poised. I could have given the safe answer. Something about coastal living and natural beauty. That I told the truth. I drew this after leaving a relationship where I'd lost myself. The lighthouse represents finding your way back to who you really are. She scribbled notes enthusiastically. There's been buzz about you online. Some people recognize you from that viral video earlier this year. My stomach tightened slightly, but I kept my voice steady. That was a different chapter of my life. Do you ever regret how you handled that situation? I considered the question seriously. I regret staying silent for so long. I regret not valuing myself sooner. But the way it ended? Well, sometimes the truth needs witnesses. After the interview, I stepped outside for air. The Portland evening was crisp, carrying the scent of rain and coffee from the cafe next door. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Saw the article preview online. You're going to be famous. Famous felt overwhelming, but recognized felt wonderful. A month later, I received an unexpected letter in my mailbox. The return address made me pause. It was from Michelle, Taylor's sister. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won. The letter was handwritten on expensive stationery. *Alex. I know I have no right to contact you, but I wanted you to know. You were right about everything. We treated you terribly and I'm ashamed of how I acted. Taylor's in therapy now, court-ordered. He asks about you sometimes. I tell him he lost the best thing that ever happened to him. Mom has good days and bad days. She asks for Taylor's friend who made the good soup, but can't remember why you're not around anymore. Maybe that's a mercy. I hope you're happy wherever you are. Michelle Asterisk. I read it twice, then filed it away. Not because I was holding grudges, but because some chapters needed to stay closed. The real surprise came 3 weeks later. Carmen, Eleanor's nurse, called again. I probably shouldn't be telling you this, she said, but Eleanor had one of her clear moments yesterday. She asked me to find your phone number. What did she want? She said she wanted to thank you. She remembered everything you did for her. The doctor visits, the medications, the way you made her feel safe. he cried Alex. She said she was sorry for forgetting your kindness. That night I made Eleanor's favorite soup in my small kitchen. I couldn't deliver it to her, but making it felt like closure. Like forgiveness served warm in a ceramic bowl. My art continued to find audiences. A cafe in Seattle wanted to display my coastal series. A magazine featured my work in an article about artists of resilience. Each recognition felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd thought was lost. One evening, while organizing my studio space, I found the black envelope I'd kept as a memento. The one that had contained all the evidence, all the proof of betrayal and fraud. It sat in my desk drawer like a trophy I no longer needed to display. I took it to the balcony and let the ocean wind carry away its contents page by page. The financial documents, the photographs, the transcripts, all of it scattered into the salt air. I kept only one thing, Grace's card that had come with the perfume. Thanks for supporting Taylor's grind. The irony was too perfect to discard. 6 months after the gallery opening, I received an email that made me laugh out loud. A production company wanted to option my story for a television series. Revenge drama meets women's empowerment, the producer wrote. Very trending right now. I declined politely. My story wasn't entertainment. It was transformation. And transformation couldn't be packaged for mass consumption. Instead, I started teaching art classes at the community center. My students were mostly women over 50, many dealing with life transitions of their own. Divorce, empty nests, career changes, deaths of spouses. We painted together twice a week, sharing stories and silence in equal measure. I haven't held a brush in 30 years, said Margaret, a recent widow learning to live alone. It's never too late to start again, I told her and meant it. On the anniversary of the barbecue, I didn't mark the date intentionally. I was too busy living to commemorate past destructions. I was painting a new series, not lighthouses this time but doors. Open doors, closed doors, doors that led to unknown rooms filled with light. That evening my phone rang. A known number, but I answered anyway. Alex, this is Detective Chen. My breath caught. Is everything okay? I wanted to update you on the case. Taylor accepted a plea deal, 3 years with the possibility of early release for good behavior. Grace got 5 years, no early release. She was the mastermind after all. Justice felt quieter than I'd expected. Not triumphant, just complete. Thank you for letting me know. Alex, for what it's worth, you did the right thing. People like that count on others staying silent. After hanging up, I walked to my easel and picked up my brush. The canvas was blank, waiting for whatever came next. I no longer painted from anger or pain or the need to prove anything. I painted from joy. They had called me temporary, disposable, forgettable. But temporary things don't leave lasting marks. Disposable things don't create beauty that outlasts their creators. Forgettable things don't inspire recognition in strangers' eyes. I was never temporary. I was permanent. A woman who endured, who transformed, who emerged from darkness carrying light. And every time I signed my name on a new piece of art, I smiled. Because sometimes the woman they underestimate is the one who gets the last word. And sometimes that word is simply, Alex. If this story of calculated revenge had you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Alex handed Taylor that black envelope at his own celebration, knowing exactly what was inside. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more thrilling stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.
I'm Rebecca, 29 years old, and my wedding day should have been perfect. The lakeside venue sparkled in June sunlight, white roses everywhere, and Nathan looked handsome, waiting at the altar. Then, during the reception speeches, my sister Stephanie grabbed the microphone, smoothed her maid of honor dress, and announced, "I'm pregnant with Nathan's baby." The room fell silent. Champagne glasses froze midair. I stood there in my $1,000 gown while my world collapsed publicly. But here's what nobody expected. I smiled. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, hit that subscribe button, and stay for a twist that changed everything. Growing up with Stephanie wasn't easy. Despite being only 3 years younger than me, she always knew how to command attention in ways I couldn't. While I meticulously followed rules and sought validation through academic achievements, Stephanie broke every rule and was forgiven instantly. Our childhood home in suburban Michigan became the stage for our contrasting personalities. Rebecca's our responsible one, my mother would say proudly when I brought home straight A's. But when Stephanie came home with mediocre grades and a charming story about helping a friend, she'd receive the same proud smile. The pattern became predictable. I worked twice as hard for half the recognition. Despite this dynamic, I loved my sister. We shared secrets in our matching twin beds, whispered about crushes, and defended each other against neighborhood bullies. There was an unspoken understanding between us. I would be the stable one, and she would be the wild spirit. This balance worked until we reached adulthood. After graduating with a business degree, I secured a position at Marshall Marketing, quickly rising through the ranks to become one of their youngest executives. My life settled into a comfortable routine of client meetings, professional development, and occasional dinner dates that went nowhere. Meanwhile, Stephanie floated between jobs, bartending, retail management, yoga instruction, changing careers as often as she changed boyfriends. "You need to live a little, Becca," she'd tell me during our monthly sister brunches. "All work and no play makes for a dull obituary." Then came the Chicago Marketing Conference that changed everything. Standing by the coffee station during a networking break, I locked eyes with Nathan Wilson, a digital strategy director from a partner agency. Tall with kind brown eyes and an easy laugh, he approached me with 2 coffees. "I noticed you take yours black," he said, handing me a cup.
I'm not done.
"Your presentation on consumer engagement was brilliant." Unlike my previous dates, conversations with Nathan flowed effortlessly. We shared similar ambitions and values, but complemented each other's differences. Where I was structured and analytical, he was creative and intuitive. Our first date stretched from dinner to a midnight walk along Lake Michigan, where he admitted he'd been working up the courage to talk to me all day at the conference. "There's something about you," he said. "You're different from anyone I've ever met." After 6 months of dating, I introduced Nathan to my family over Thanksgiving dinner. My parents welcomed him immediately, almost too enthusiastically. Dad pulled out his expensive whiskey, and Mom showed him my embarrassing childhood photos without the usual new boyfriend probation period. Stephanie arrived late, making her typical dramatic entrance in a tight red dress despite our family's tradition of casual holiday attire. When she spotted Nathan, something flickered across her face. A look I'd seen before when we were teenagers, and I received the lead in the school play she wanted. But the expression vanished so quickly I convinced myself I'd imagined it. "So you're the famous Nathan," she said, kissing his cheek a beat too long. "Rebecca's been hiding you from us." Throughout dinner, Stephanie directed most of her questions and comments toward Nathan. She laughed too loudly at his jokes, touched his arm when speaking to him, and managed to mention her recent breakup multiple times. I noticed these behaviors, but dismissed them as Stephanie being her typical attention-seeking self. Nathan and I continued building our relationship. His software development firm offered him a promotion that would relocate him to Michigan, conveniently closer to me. We found an apartment midway between our offices, adopted a golden retriever named Cooper, and settled into domestic bliss. 2 years after we met, during a surprise weekend trip to Mackinac Island, Nathan proposed at sunset with a vintage oval diamond ring that had belonged to his grandmother. "You're everything I never knew I needed," he said, kneeling on one knee. "Will you marry me, Rebecca?" The wedding planning began immediately. We selected June 15th at Silver Lake Lodge, a rustic, elegant venue with panoramic water views. When I called Stephanie to ask her to be my maid of honor, she screamed with such excitement I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "Of course. I've been waiting for you to ask," she gushed. "I've already started browsing bridesmaid dresses online." Her enthusiasm struck me as odd considering she'd previously mocked traditional weddings, but I welcomed her support. Little did I know this decision would set in motion events that would change the course of my life forever. Wedding planning brought out a side of Stephanie I'd never seen before. My typically non-committal sister suddenly had opinions about everything from invitation fonts to napkin colors. She volunteered to accompany me to every vendor meeting, dress fitting, and tasting session. While I initially appreciated her enthusiasm, Something felt off about her intense involvement. "I'm thinking ivory linens with sage accents," I mentioned during a planning brunch. "Nathan would prefer pure white," Stephanie countered confidently. "He mentioned loving the clean look when we discussed it." "When did you discuss linens with Nathan?" I asked, stirring my coffee. "Oh, in passing," she replied, quickly changing the subject to centerpieces. These moments of presumed intimacy with my fiancé multiplied. Stephanie seemed to know Nathan's preferences on details I hadn't even discussed with him myself. When I mentioned this to my mother, she dismissed my concerns. "Your sister's finally showing some responsibility. Don't discourage her. She's probably just trying to make things perfect for you." 3 months before the wedding, I began noticing Stephanie constantly checking her phone during our planning sessions, smiling secretly at text messages. Whenever I asked who was texting, she'd vaguely mention friend or work stuff. Around the same time, Nathan started having unexpected client emergencies that required evening meetings. The red flags culminated one Tuesday afternoon when I came home early with a migraine. Opening our apartment door, I heard Stephanie's distinctive laugh from the kitchen. I found her perched on our counter, wineglass in hand, while Nathan leaned against the refrigerator, also drinking wine. They jumped apart when they saw me. "Becca, you're home early," Nathan said, his voice slightly higher than normal. "I brought over some flower samples," Stephanie explained, gesturing to a small envelope on the table that looked suspiciously untouched. "Nathan was just helping me decide since you weren't answering your phone." "My phone never rang," I said, pulling it from my purse to show no missed calls. "Oh, I must have dialed wrong." "Silly me," she laughed, gathering her things with unusual haste. After she left, Nathan became defensively affectionate, suggesting we order my favorite takeout and watch my preferred movies. His overcompensation only deepened my unease. "Is there something going on with you and Stephanie?" I finally asked as we sat on the couch, the movie playing unwatched.
What? No.
"How could you even think that?" Nathan looked genuinely shocked. "She's your sister, Becca. And I love you. There's nothing happening." His denial seemed sincere, and I wanted desperately to believe him. With the wedding approaching and deposits paid, I convinced myself stress was making me paranoid. The bridal shower Stephanie organized was elaborate and picture-perfect, though I noticed she'd invited several of her own friends who barely knew me. At my bachelorette weekend in Nashville, she disappeared for hours on Saturday night, returning to our hotel suite at dawn claiming she'd met old friends. Most concerning was her insistence on planning Nathan's bachelor party despite this traditionally being the best man's responsibility. When I questioned this unusual arrangement, she brushed it off. "Todd's so busy with work, and I know all the best places in Chicago. It makes sense for me to help." My bridesmaid Amanda pulled me aside during wedding dress alterations. "Is everything okay with Stephanie? She's acting weird around Nathan. At your engagement party, I saw them whispering in the corner, and they stopped when I approached." 2 weeks before the wedding, I confronted Nathan again after finding an unfamiliar earring in our bedroom. Small, gold, and definitely not mine. "It must be from the cleaning service," Nathan suggested, though we didn't have a cleaning service. When I pointed this out, he backtracked. "Maybe it's yours and you forgot about it? Or it could be Amanda's from when you all had wine here last month." His explanation made little sense, but his eyes held such earnest concern that I questioned my own memory. Was I becoming the stereotypical paranoid bride? The stress of planning a wedding while maintaining my executive position had left me exhausted and emotionally fragile. The night before our wedding, my mother and I shared a quiet moment in my hotel suite. "I always dreamed of this day for you," she said, adjusting my rehearsal dinner dress. "Nathan's a wonderful man. Your father and I couldn't be happier." I nearly confessed my suspicions then, but the joy in her eyes stopped me. Instead, I nodded and smiled, swallowing the knot in my throat. The morning of the wedding, chaos erupted when Stephanie arrived 45 minutes late for our hair and makeup session. "Traffic was insane," she explained, though the other bridesmaids who took the same route arrived on time. Throughout the morning preparations, Stephanie seemed unusually nervous, checking her phone constantly, drinking champagne too quickly, and disappearing to the bathroom repeatedly. When Amanda helped lace up my dress, I caught Stephanie staring at me in the mirror, an unreadable expression on her face. Despite everything, as I prepared to walk down the aisle toward Nathan, I made a conscious decision to embrace this day. Whatever doubts plagued me, I would address them after the honeymoon. Today would be perfect, even if I had to force it to be. The ceremony itself was everything I'd dreamed. Silver Lake Lodge looked magical with afternoon sunlight filtering through tall windows, illuminating arrangements of white roses and eucalyptus. String quartet music filled the air as 150 guests turned to watch me walk down the aisle on my father's arm. Nathan's face when he first saw me in my dress, a fitted lace gown with delicate beading, showed genuine awe. His eyes welled with tears, and in that moment, all my doubts seemed ridiculous. This man loved me. I could see it in every feature of his face. Our personalized vows made several guests stab at their eyes. When Nathan promised to always be honest and faithful, his voice cracked with emotion. We exchanged rings, shared our first kiss as husband and wife, and proceeded back down the aisle to cheers and applause. The cocktail hour flowed seamlessly into dinner in the lodge's grand ballroom, transformed with twinkling lights and greenery. Our first dance to At Last by Etta James felt magical, as did the father-daughter dance that followed. Nathan's mother cried happily watching us, while my parents beamed with pride from the head table. I barely noticed Stephanie during these moments, too caught up in the celebration. Only later would I realize she disappeared several times during the reception, returning with slightly smudged makeup and disheveled hair she claimed resulted from helping the coordinator. After the delicious four-course dinner, the speeches began. My father stood first, champagne in hand. When Rebecca was little, she used to say she wanted to marry someone kind and smart, he reminisced. Nathan, you are exactly the man she described all those years ago. Welcome to our family, son. Nathan's best friend Todd followed with humorous stories about Nathan's college days and ended with a touching tribute to our relationship. As Todd returned to his seat, the DJ announced dinner service was complete and invited guests to enjoy the dessert buffet and dancing. That's when Stephanie unexpectedly grabbed the microphone. She wasn't scheduled to speak. We had agreed to keep formal speeches minimal. Wait, I need to say something, she announced, slightly slurring her words. The room quieted out of politeness. My big sister Rebecca has always been perfect, Stephanie began, swaying slightly. Perfect grades, perfect job, perfect apartment. And now, perfect wedding. I tensed in my seat, sensing trouble in her tone. Nathan reached for my hand under the table, squeezing it reassuringly. Growing up in Rebecca's shadow wasn't easy, Stephanie continued. Always being compared, always falling short. But Rebecca never made me feel less than. She's the most generous person I know. The speech was taking an unexpectedly heartfelt turn, and I relaxed slightly. Perhaps I had misjudged her intentions. Which is why what I'm about to say is so difficult. She paused dramatically, her eyes scanning the crowd before landing on me. Rebecca, I know you'll eventually forgive me, because that's who you are. But everyone here should know the truth. The room grew utterly silent. Even the catering staff froze in place. I'm pregnant with Nathan's baby. 5 words that shattered everything. The announcement hung in the air like shards of glass. Someone gasped audibly. My mother's champagne glass slipped from her hand, splashing onto the white tablecloth. Time seemed to stop as every eye in the room turned to me, then Nathan, then back to me. Nathan jumped to his feet, knocking his chair backward. That's a lie, he shouted, face draining of color. Rebecca, that's not true. I swear to God. Stephanie stood defiantly, microphone still in hand. 3 months along, Nathan. Remember Chicago? Your bachelor party? Last week in your office? Should I continue? The room erupted in murmurs. My bridesmaids moved toward me protectively while Nathan's parents whispered frantically to each other. Through it all, I remained perfectly still, my hands folded neatly on the table before me, my expression carefully neutral despite the hurricane raging inside. Nathan approached me, reaching for my hands. "Becca, please. She's making this up." "I would never." I raised my hand to silence him, then slowly stood and smoothed my dress. The room gradually quieted as I walked deliberately toward Stephanie and extended my hand for the microphone. Confusion flashed across her face as she surrendered it. "Thank you all for coming to my wedding," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I apologize for this unexpected drama. But since we're sharing truths today, I have one of my own." I turned to face Stephanie and Nathan, who both stared at me with growing apprehension. "The thing is," I continued, "I already knew." The confusion on Stephanie's face was almost worth the public humiliation. She had expected tears, screaming, perhaps a dramatic exit. Instead, I stood calmly before our guests, microphone in hand, ready to reclaim my narrative. "3 days ago, I found everything," I explained, my voice echoing through the silent ballroom. Text messages, hotel receipts, photos. All of it. I described how Nathan had forgotten to log out of his email on our shared laptop. A notification appeared, a hotel confirmation for a room booked the previous week when Nathan claimed to be at a business dinner. Curiosity led me to discover hundreds of messages between him and Stephanie dating back 8 months, their content growing increasingly intimate. At first, I couldn't believe it. I continued. My sister and my fiancé. The two people I trusted most. So I did what any reasonable woman would do. I hired a private investigator. Gasps rippled through the room. Nathan's face drained of all remaining color. "I actually contacted Jackson Investigations 3 weeks ago when the evidence became impossible to ignore. The secret meetings, the unexplained absences, the way they both knew details they shouldn't. Yesterday, I received the final report with time-stamped photos, location data, and witness statements confirming their affair." I gestured to my bridesmaid Amanda, who approached with a manila envelope. From it, I withdrew several photographs showing Nathan and Stephanie entering hotel rooms, sharing intimate dinners, and kissing in his car. I didn't display these to the guests but made sure Nathan and Stephanie saw them clearly. "What you don't know, Stephanie," I said, turning to my sister, "is that I never actually filed our marriage license." Now it was Nathan's turn to look shocked. "What are you talking about? We signed it yesterday." "We signed a document that looked like a marriage license," I clarified. "The actual license is still sitting on my lawyer's desk and signed. Legally, Nathan, we are not married." I reached into the envelope again and pulled out another document. "This is an annulment form stating that the marriage was never consummated. I've already signed it. All it needs is your signature, and this entire charade disappears legally." Nathan's shock morphed into anger. "You tricked me? How could you?" "How could I?" My laugh held no humor. "That's rich coming from the man who's been sleeping with my sister for 8 months. Stephanie finally found her voice. "You knew? This whole time you knew? Then why go through with the wedding?" "Because you both needed to experience what real betrayal feels like," I replied simply. "You wanted to humiliate me today, Stephanie. You timed your announcement for maximum damage. But I refuse to give you that power." I turned to address our stunned guests. "I apologize for involving you all in this deception. The truth is, I discovered their affair and planned this moment to reclaim my dignity. While there won't be a legal marriage to celebrate, I've paid for this reception, and I intend to enjoy it, as a celebration of my liberation rather than my wedding." My father stood then, coming to stand beside me. "Anyone who wishes to stay and support Rebecca is welcome. Anyone uncomfortable with the situation is free to leave, with our understanding." Nathan's parents approached, his mother's eyes filled with tears. "Rebecca, we had no idea. We're so sorry." "Don't apologize for him," I said gently. "This isn't your fault." Stephanie attempted to speak again, stepping forward. "It wasn't just an affair. We fell in love. You need to understand." "Actually, I don't need to understand anything," I interrupted. What I need is for you to leave. You're fired as my sister and my maid of honor. The wedding coordinator, who had been watching in horror, whispered something to the DJ. Suddenly, upbeat music filled the room, breaking the tension slightly. I handed the microphone back and addressed my bridesmaids. I'm going to change out of this dress. Amanda, would you help me? 20 minutes later, I returned to the reception wearing an elegant blue evening dress I'd packed for our honeymoon departure. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. I had literally and figuratively changed my narrative. Many guests had chosen to stay, and they applauded as I entered. Several approached with hugs and words of support. As the reception cautiously resumed, I asked the coordinator to direct Nathan and Stephanie to the small conference room adjacent to the ballroom. It was time for a private conversation. The conference room felt suffocatingly small with the four of us inside. Me, Nathan, Stephanie, and the wedding coordinator, who quickly excused herself after ensuring we had privacy. Nathan paced like a caged animal while Stephanie sat rigidly in a leather chair, makeup streaked from crying. How long have you known? Nathan demanded, his charm replaced by defensive anger. Does it matter? I replied, remaining standing to maintain the psychological advantage. The better question is, how long have you been sleeping with my sister? Their eyes met briefly before Stephanie answered. It started at your engagement party. 8 months. While I'd been selecting flower arrangements and writing vase, they had been betraying me in the most intimate way possible. The night we celebrated our engagement? I clarified, remembering how Nathan had disappeared for nearly an hour during the party. Very classy. It wasn't planned, Nathan insisted. We were both drunk, talking about you actually. One thing led to another. Spare me the details, I interrupted.
What I want to know is why.
Why my sister, Nathan? And Stephanie, why the man I was going to marry? Stephanie's answer revealed everything about her character. You always had everything so easy, Rebecca. The perfect career, the perfect boyfriend. I just wanted something that was meant for you, just once.
Easy.
I laughed incredulously. I worked for everything I have. Nothing was handed to me. That's how you see it, she muttered. Nathan attempted a different approach, his voice softening. Becca, I made a terrible mistake. I do love you. The affair was just physical. It wasn't for me, Stephanie interjected, glaring at him. You said you loved me. You said you were going to leave her after the wedding. Their unified front crumbled as they turned on each other, revealing contradictory promises and plans. Nathan claimed the affair was ending. Stephanie insisted they had discussed a future together. As they argued, a crucial detail emerged. Wait, I interrupted. Are you actually pregnant, Stephanie? Her hesitation told me everything. I might be. The test was inconclusive. Show me the test, I demanded. I threw it away, she mumbled, avoiding my eyes. Nathan grabbed her arm. You told me you were sure. You showed me a positive test. Stephanie's confession came in a small voice. I bought a positive test online. I thought if you believed I was pregnant, you'd leave her for me. The look of relief on Nathan's face quickly turned to anger. You manipulated me? All this drama for nothing. For nothing? I echoed. Whether she's pregnant or not doesn't change what you both did. The door opened then, revealing my parents. My mother's eyes were swollen from crying, while my father's face was set in stone. We need to talk to our daughters, my father said firmly. Nathan, I think you should leave. Mr. Parker, please. Let me explain. There's nothing to explain, my father interrupted. You betrayed my daughter in the worst possible way, with her own sister. Get out of my sight before I forget I'm a gentleman. For the first time in our lives, my parents didn't rush to Stephanie's defense. As Nathan slunk out, my mother approached Stephanie. How could you do this to your sister? She asked, her voice breaking. Mom, you don't understand. Don't. My mother held up her hand. Don't make excuses. What you did was unforgivable. My father turned to me, his eyes softening. Rebecca, we support whatever you want to do now. If you want to leave, we'll make your excuses to the guests.
I'm staying, he replied firmly.
I paid for this party, and I'm going to enjoy it. But I want Stephanie removed. I'll handle it, my father nodded, turning to Stephanie. Let's go. I'll drive you home. You're taking her side? Stephanie looked genuinely shocked. After all these years, you're finally choosing Rebecca over me? We're choosing basic human decency, my mother replied. Something you seem to have forgotten. As Stephanie was escorted out by my father, I noticed the security guards I'd hired watching discreetly. I'd arranged them specifically for this possibility, hoping I wouldn't need them, but prepared nonetheless. Meanwhile, guests observed Nathan leaving the venue, his shoulders hunched in defeat. Some of his friends followed, looking confused and embarrassed. Others, particularly those who knew both of us well, chose to stay. My college roommate Melissa found me as I returned to the reception. Rebecca, I don't even know what to say. Are you really okay? For the first time since the revelation, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had happened. No, I admitted, voice cracking. But I will be. She hugged me tightly. What are you going to do about the honeymoon? All those deposits. I thought for a moment, then smiled through my tears. Want to go to Bali with me next week? All expenses paid. Melissa's eyes widened. Are you serious? Completely. I need my best friend right now, not a lying cheater. We returned to the reception, where I took the microphone once more. Thank you all for staying. This isn't the celebration I planned, but it's the one I need. Today marks not the beginning of a marriage, but the start of my new life. One built on self-respect and truth. So please, enjoy the food, the drinks, and the dancing. Today we celebrate authenticity. The party continued with renewed energy, many guests approaching to offer support or share their own stories of overcoming betrayal. What had been designed as a wedding reception transformed into something more meaningful, a community of people rallying around someone who chose dignity over deception. 5 days after what should have been my wedding day, Melissa and I boarded a flight to Bali. The irony of using my honeymoon tickets for a friendship trip wasn't lost on me, but it felt like the perfect reclamation of what was meant to be a celebration of love. Just a different kind of love, the supportive, unconditional friendship that had sustained me through the worst days of my life. Our oceanfront villa in Ubud became my sanctuary for 2 weeks. While Melissa explored the markets and temples, I often sat on our private balcony, journaling my thoughts and feelings. The physical distance from Michigan created emotional space to process everything. I don't know who I'm more angry at, I wrote on our 3rd day. Nathan for betraying my trust, Stephanie for betraying our sisterhood, or myself for missing so many obvious signs. How did I not see what was happening right in front of me? The journal became my confidant, capturing raw emotions I couldn't express even to Melissa. Pages filled with anger gave way to grief, then gradually to reflection. By the end of our stay, I was writing about rebuilding rather than revenge. Our last evening in Bali, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, I made a promise to myself. This experience will refine me, not define me. Returning home meant facing reality. Nathan had moved most of his things out of our apartment while I was gone, leaving behind a terse note about forwarding his mail. Cooper, our golden retriever, greeted me with enthusiastic licks, blissfully unaware of how our family had fractured. At least you're still loyal, I whispered into his fur. The practical matters came first. I contacted a realtor about selling the apartment. Too many memories haunted those rooms. My lawyer confirmed the marriage had been successfully invalidated, requiring no divorce proceedings since we were never legally married. The wedding gifts were returned with personal notes explaining the situation as tactfully as possible. What I hadn't anticipated was the social media fallout. Someone had recorded Stephanie's announcement and my response on their phone. The clips spread rapidly, first among wedding guests, then to their connections, and eventually to viral status on multiple platforms. Strangers began sending messages of support. Women shared their own stories of betrayal and recovery. Several relationship podcasts invited me as a guest to discuss maintaining dignity through heartbreak. While I declined most requests, I recognized an opportunity to transform my pain into purpose. I started a private blog, Recovering Rebecca, documenting my healing journey without naming names or sharing specific details. The authenticity resonated with readers, creating a community of women supporting each other through similar experiences. Professionally, I threw myself into work, using the structure and challenges to distract from personal turmoil. My boss, Jennifer, noticed my increased focus and offered an unexpected opportunity. "We're launching a new division focused on authentic marketing to women," she explained during a private lunch. "After seeing how you handled that wedding situation with such grace under extreme pressure, I can't think of anyone better to lead it." The promotion came with a significant salary increase and creative control over campaigns, exactly the professional challenge I needed. Therapy became another cornerstone of my recovery.
Dr.
Marshall helped me work through the complex emotions of dual betrayal. "You're mourning multiple losses," she explained during an early session. "The loss of your relationship with Nathan, your relationship with Stephanie, and your vision of what your life would be. It's natural to feel overwhelmed." Family gatherings became complicated negotiations. My parents tried maintaining relationships with both daughters, often resulting in awkward arrangements where we attended separate holiday celebrations. Their attempts to broker peace between us met with firm resistance from me. "I'm not ready," I told my mother when she suggested a mediated conversation 3 months after the wedding. "Forgiveness might be possible someday, but reconciliation requires trust, and that's been completely destroyed." Nathan made multiple attempts to contact me. Calls, texts, even a handwritten letter delivered with flowers to my office. Each message contained some variation of "I made a terrible mistake" and "I miss you." I responded to none of them. Stephanie proved more persistent. She showed up at my workplace, sent daily emails, and even enlisted mutual friends to plead her case. Her messages oscillated between defensive justification and desperate apology, revealing her continued inability to truly understand the depth of her betrayal. 6 months after the non-wedding, I purchased a modern condo in a downtown high-rise, completely different from the suburban apartment Nathan and I had shared. The fresh start included new furniture, new routines, and even new friends made through a community volunteer program. "This place is so you," Amanda commented during my housewarming gathering, which I'd kept small and intimate. "It's strong and elegant, just like its owner." Creating new traditions helped reclaim holidays and milestones. Instead of dwelling on what should have been our first Christmas as a married couple, I organized a gift drive for a women's shelter. Rather than mourning what would have been our first anniversary, I treated myself to a photography class I'd always wanted to take. During one of these classes, I reconnected with Michael Gardner, a college acquaintance who'd attended the same university but ran in different circles. Now a successful architectural photographer, he remembered me from a business ethics class we'd shared senior year. "I always admired your principled arguments in Professor Wilson's debates," he mentioned as we adjusted camera settings for a night photography exercise. "You never took the easy position, even when it meant standing alone." Michael's friendship developed naturally and without pressure. We shared a love of art films, spicy food, and early morning hikes with Cooper. Unlike my relationship with Nathan, which had accelerated quickly, this connection grew slowly, building on genuine friendship and transparent communication. "I heard about what happened at your wedding," he admitted 6 weeks into our friendship. "Everyone at the firm was talking about it after the video went viral. For what it's worth, I thought you handled it with incredible dignity." His honesty was refreshing after months of people carefully avoiding the topic. "Thank you." It wasn't my finest moment, but it was definitely one of my most authentic. On what would have been my first wedding anniversary, I performed a private ceremony of release. Taking the wedding dress I'd preserved but never wore again, I donated it to an organization providing formal wear to disadvantaged students for prom. My engagement ring funded a scholarship for young women pursuing marketing degrees. These symbolic acts helped me close one chapter and open another. The woman who had stood frozen in shock at her wedding reception was becoming someone stronger, someone who understood her worth wasn't tied to others' loyalty. 2 years after the wedding that wasn't, I stood at the podium of the Michigan Women in Business Awards, accepting recognition for the successful marketing campaign my team had developed for domestic violence awareness. The irony wasn't lost on me. My personal trauma had ultimately led to professional triumph. Authenticity isn't just good marketing, I told the audience. It's good living. When we embrace our true stories, even the painful chapters, we connect with others in meaningful ways. Looking out at the crowd, I spotted Michael in the third row, his proud smile warming me from across the room. After 15 months of friendship and another 9 of dating, our relationship had developed into something I'd never experienced before, a partnership built on complete honesty and mutual respect. My relationship with my parents had evolved significantly. After initial attempts to maintain equal relationships with both daughters, they eventually acknowledged the fundamental difference between Stephanie's actions and my responses. While they never completely severed ties with her, they established clear boundaries about family gatherings and discussions. "We failed you both in different ways," my father admitted during a difficult conversation. "We enabled Stephanie's worst behaviors by never holding her accountable, and we took your strength for granted, assuming you didn't need the same attention and affirmation." This acknowledgement helped heal wounds I'd carried since childhood, allowing us to build a more authentic relationship. Stephanie and Nathan's relationship had imploded spectacularly just 3 months after the wedding. Without the thrill of secrecy and forbidden attraction, they quickly discovered they had little in common beyond their betrayal. According to mutual friends, their breakup involved public screaming matches and social media warfare. Nathan relocated to California for a fresh start, occasionally sending holiday cards with generic messages that I promptly recycled. Stephanie remained in Michigan but moved to a different city, cycling through jobs and relationships with her characteristic instability. Her attempts to reconcile continued, evolving from desperate pleas to more measured approaches. On the second anniversary of the wedding that wasn't, she sent a letter that showed the first genuine signs of growth. "I don't expect forgiveness," she wrote. "What I did was unforgivable. But I want you to know I'm in therapy, trying to understand why I hurt the one person who always supported me. My jealousy and insecurity don't excuse my actions, but they help explain a pattern I'm working to break. I miss my sister, but more importantly, I regret causing you pain." While I appreciated the self-awareness, I maintained firm boundaries. We occasionally exchanged brief texts on birthdays or major holidays, but our relationship would never return to what it had been. Some betrayals permanently alter the landscape of relationships, and this was one of them. The most profound changes occurred within me. Professional success brought satisfaction, but the internal growth meant more. I learned to trust my instincts, to recognize red flags rather than rationalize them away. I discovered the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation, the former being something I could do for my own peace, the latter requiring rebuilt trust that might never be possible. Michael and I developed our relationship deliberately, with open discussions about expectations and boundaries. When he proposed after 18 months of dating, he did so with full awareness of my past. "I know trust doesn't come easily to you anymore," he said, holding a simple but elegant diamond ring. "I'm not asking for blind faith. I'm asking for partnership, building something together day by day, with honesty as our foundation." Standing in my living room, Cooper watching curiously from his bed, I felt none of the reservation that should have accompanied this moment. Instead, a calm certainty settled over me. "Yes," I answered. "But this time, we're eloping." We shared a laugh that acknowledged the past without being defined by it. My journey from betrayal to rebuilding taught me that life's worst moments often contain the seeds of transformation. The public humiliation I feared would destroy me instead revealed my resilience. The loss of relationships I thought essential created space for connections that truly nourished me. Most importantly, I learned that genuine strength isn't about preventing cracks in your foundation, but about how you rebuild after the earthquake. The structure you create after devastation can be more authentic and beautiful than what stood before. To those of you watching who have experienced betrayal, remember this. Your worth isn't determined by someone else's loyalty. Your story doesn't end with their chapter. You get to write the next pages, and they can be more authentic and powerful than anything that came before. If my story resonated with you, please share in the comments how you've overcome betrayal or rebuilt trust in your own life. Each experience is unique, but the courage to move forward connects us all. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories of resilience, and like this video if it gave you hope or perspective. Thank you for witnessing my journey. May it help illuminate your own path forward, whatever challenges you face. Remember, the most beautiful stories often include the darkest chapters, but they don't end there. I'm Samantha, 32, sitting quietly in the courtroom while my sister Grace publicly destroys me. She's always been worthless, Grace declares confidently, her voice echoing as she claims I'm incompetent to handle our grandmother's inheritance. Her lawyer husband Derek smirks beside her, certain of their victory. Then the courtroom doors open. All rise, the bailiff announces. The judge enters and says, "Good morning, everyone." I stand and respond, "Good morning, Your Honor." Grace's face turns ghostly pale as realization dawns. I am the judge who will decide the fate of our family's inheritance. Before I continue my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Family drama can look different across the country, right? If you've ever dealt with a sibling who underestimated you, hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories about family betrayal and the sweet justice that sometimes follows. Now, let me take you back to where this all began. Grace and I grew up in a modest 3-bedroom home in Philadelphia with our parents, Eleanor and Richard Adams. From my earliest memories, Grace was always the louder sister, demanding attention while I preferred books and quiet corners. When I received an A on a spelling test in 3rd grade, Grace tore it up and claimed I had cheated. When I won the science fair in 7th grade, Grace knocked my project over accidentally during the awards ceremony. These weren't isolated incidents, but the beginning of a pattern that would define our relationship for decades. Our parents tried their best to treat us equally, but Grace interpreted every situation as a competition. If Mom complimented my piano playing, Grace would immediately sit down and play a more difficult piece. If Dad praised my report card, Grace would remind him about her popularity at school. "Grades aren't everything," she would say, tossing her hair with practiced nonchalance. Samantha has no friends anyway. Despite sharing a bedroom until I was 14, Grace and I rarely had heart-to-heart conversations. She decorated her side with boy band posters and cheerleading trophies, while my half featured bookshelves and debate team certificates. The physical division of our shared space perfectly symbolized our diverging paths. When I was accepted to Penn State with a partial scholarship, Grace announced her engagement to her high school boyfriend at my celebration dinner. My achievements were consistently overshadowed by Grace's dramatic life events. By the time I graduated from law school, Grace had married and divorced twice, each time scheduling her wedding or a dramatic breakup around my milestones. Her 3rd marriage to Derek Williamson seemed different at first. Derek was a corporate attorney with political ambitions and a charismatic smile that charmed our parents immediately. Finally, someone in the family who understands what I'm going through, I had foolishly thought when they first started dating. Maybe this would be the bridge that brought Grace and me closer. I was wrong. Derek's legal background didn't connect us. It intensified Grace's competitive nature. At Christmas dinner the year they got married, Derek and I briefly discussed a Supreme Court case. Grace interrupted by spilling wine on my new dress, then spent the evening talking about Derek's recent courtroom victory while I cleaned myself up in the bathroom. "You know how clumsy Samantha is," Grace told our relatives with a tinkling laugh. "Always has her head in the clouds. Thank goodness, she's just handling paperwork and not important cases like Derek." What Grace didn't know, what she never bothered to learn, was that I had already begun my judicial career by then, starting as a court clerk and working my way up. While Grace and Derek bought a McMansion in the suburbs and leased luxury cars, I lived modestly, invested wisely, and focused on my career. My appointment to the municipal court bench at 29 was a proud but quiet achievement. I didn't need to broadcast it. Family gatherings became increasingly tense as Grace found ways to exclude me. Sunday brunches were scheduled and canceled last minute, with "sorry you missed it" photos appearing on social media. Holiday gift exchanges featured thoughtful presents for everyone except me. I typically received a generic gift card or bath set with a price tag still attached. "We just don't know what you like," Grace would say with faux innocence. "You're so private about everything." The truth was, she never asked. When our mother mentioned my promotion to a judicial position at Thanksgiving dinner 4 years ago, Grace changed the subject so quickly that most relatives missed it entirely. Later, I overheard her telling our cousin Jennifer, "Samantha's just doing administrative work at the courthouse. Nothing special." Derek encouraged Grace's behavior, whispering in her ear at family gatherings and smirking whenever I spoke. They became a united front against me, though I never understood why. I wasn't competing with them. I wasn't interested in their social climbing or country club memberships. I just wanted family peace. The last normal conversation Grace and I had was at our father's 65th birthday party 2 years ago. I found her alone in the kitchen, uncharacteristically quiet as she arranged cookies on a platter. "Need help?" I asked, reaching for a serving dish. Grace looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Why do you always have to be so perfect?" she asked. "I'm not perfect, Grace. Not even close." "You are to them," she said, nodding toward the living room where our parents were laughing with relatives. "The responsible one. The smart one. The one who never causes problems." "Is that how you see me?" I asked, genuinely surprised. She shrugged and turned away. "It doesn't matter how I see you. It's how everyone else does." She picked up the platter and plastered on her social smile before walking out. That brief moment of vulnerability was the last glimpse I had of the sister I might have known under different circumstances. By the time our grandmother Evelyn fell ill 6 months later, Grace and I were essentially strangers who happened to share parents. I had no idea that Evelyn's declining health would set in motion events that would expose the true depth of my sister's resentment and change our family forever. Our grandmother Evelyn was a force of nature well into her 80s. A retired English professor who traveled extensively, volunteered at literacy programs, and maintained the historic Victorian family home our grandfather had renovated before his death 20 years earlier. While Grace visited Evelyn primarily on holidays and for the occasional Sunday dinner when our parents were present, I had a different relationship with her. Every Wednesday evening for the past decade, I'd bring takeout to Evelyn's house. We'd eat in her sunroom surrounded by overflowing bookshelves, discussing everything from Supreme Court decisions to the mystery novels she devoured. When she was diagnosed with congestive heart failure last year, I adjusted my court schedule to drive her to medical appointments and help organize her medications. "You're like me, Samantha," she told me during one of our final conversations. "You observe before you speak. You listen before you judge. That's a rare quality these days." When Evelyn passed away peacefully in her sleep, I was devastated but not surprised. At 87, she had lived a full life. What did surprise me was Grace's sudden intense interest in helping with funeral arrangements and estate matters. "I'll handle everything," Grace announced at the funeral home, dressed in an expensive black suit that seemed more appropriate for a business meeting than a grandmother's memorial. "Samantha is too busy with work and, honestly, too emotional right now." I was indeed emotional about losing Evelyn, but perfectly capable of fulfilling my grandmother's clearly documented wishes. Grace, however, had already contacted a real estate agent about getting the old house ready to sell before Evelyn was even buried. The initial family gathering after the funeral was held at Evelyn's Victorian home. While relatives shared memories in the living room, Grace led a group through the house, pointing out antiques and artwork as if conducting an estate sale preview. "This grandfather clock would look perfect in your foyer, Aunt Patricia," I overheard her saying. "I'm sure we can work something out when we divide everything up." When our parents' longtime friend Martha mentioned that Evelyn had always said her first edition book collection would go to me, Grace laughed dismissively. "Grandma said lots of things over the years," she replied. "But Derek says what matters is what's actually in the will. And as the oldest grandchild, I'll be making sure everything is distributed fairly." I was 2 years younger than Grace, Hardly a significant age gap, but she had always wielded her oldest grandchild status like a weapon. What she didn't know was that Evelyn had updated her will just 3 months before her death, with me present as she reviewed the documents with her attorney, Thomas Harrington. The official will reading was scheduled for 2 weeks after the funeral. Grace arrived with Derek and their matching Louis Vuitton briefcases, looking more like they were attending a corporate merger than a family gathering. Our parents sat quietly in the corner, Dad squeezing Mom's hand as Mr. Harrington began reading. The will was straightforward. Evelyn's substantial financial assets would be divided equally among her 4 grandchildren, Grace, myself, and our 2 cousins from our father's brother. The historic family home and its contents, however, were left specifically to me, with a letter explaining Evelyn's wish that I preserve the property's legacy. "This is ridiculous," Grace interrupted, standing up before Mr. Harrington finished reading. "Samantha obviously manipulated Grandma when she was sick. Derek, tell them this won't stand." Derek cleared his throat authoritatively. "As a practicing attorney, I can assure you this will contain several problematic elements. The undue influence is obvious, and we'll be formally contesting it." Our cousins looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. Our parents exchanged worried glances. "Your grandmother was of completely sound mind when she updated her will," Mr. Harrington said firmly. "Judge Wilson from probate court can confirm this, as she specifically requested an independent evaluation of Evelyn's capacity, knowing someone might question her decisions." "Of course you'd say that," Grace snapped. "You've probably been overcharging her for years." What followed was a whisper campaign that spread through our extended family like wildfire. According to Grace, I had isolated Evelyn from the family during her final months, convinced her to change her will, and possibly even hastened her death by messing with her medications. These accusations were not only false, but deeply hurtful coming from my own sister. While I was grieving our grandmother, Grace was inventorying Evelyn's possessions. She showed up at the house repeatedly with helpers who were suspiciously focused on photographing artwork and jewelry. When I installed a security system after finding an empty jewelry box that had contained Evelyn's wedding rings, Grace accused me of acting paranoid and keeping family treasures from everyone. The truth about Grace and Derek's interest in Evelyn's estate emerged a month after her death. My cousin Jennifer called me, hesitant and uncomfortable. "I probably shouldn't tell you this," she said, "but I overheard Derek on the phone at the memorial reception. They're in serious financial trouble, Samantha. Something about investment losses and a second mortgage. He was telling someone they were counting on the old lady's house to solve their problems." This explained Grace's obsession with selling the property immediately. The Victorian home was worth well over $1 million in the current market, not including its contents. When I stopped by the house unexpectedly the next day and found Grace and Derek with an art appraiser, the pieces fell into place. Just getting things valued for insurance purposes, Derek claimed smoothly, but the notepad in his hand clearly showed calculations of potential sales prices. "Interesting," I replied, "especially since several items seem to be missing already." Grace's face flushed. "We're just borrowing a few things temporarily. As family heirlooms, they belong to all of us." "That's not what Grandma's will says," I reminded her. "That will is a joke," Derek interjected. "And we'll prove it in court." I later discovered that Grace and Derek had second and third mortgages on their home, credit card debt approaching 6 figures, and a gambling problem Derek had hidden from everyone. They weren't just interested in their fair share of Evelyn's estate. They needed everything they could get their hands on to avoid financial ruin. The situation became even more disturbing when Evelyn's caregiver, Maria, contacted me privately. Apparently, Grace had visited Evelyn 3 months before her death, her only solo visit in years, and pressured her to sign documents Derek had prepared. "Your grandmother refused," Maria told me. "She said the papers would disinherit Samantha, and she became so upset that her blood pressure spiked dangerously. I had to ask your sister to leave." This visit had occurred just 1 week before Evelyn updated her will with Mr. Harrington. The timing wasn't coincidental. Evelyn had been protecting me from Grace and Derek's schemes. What Grace didn't realize was that she had inadvertently set in motion the legal battle that would expose everything she had tried to hide. The formal legal challenge to Evelyn's will arrived via courier on a Tuesday morning as I was preparing for court. Derek had filed extensive paperwork claiming I had exercised undue influence over our mentally compromised grandmother. The documentation included affidavits from distant relatives I barely knew, all testifying to my controlling behavior and unhealthy influence over Evelyn. "This is just the beginning," Derek had written in a note paper-clipped to the filing. "Drop the inheritance claims now, or we'll make this very public and very ugly." The threat was clear. As a judge, my reputation was essential to my career. Derek was gambling that I would surrender rather than endure a public legal battle that might raise questions about my professional integrity, regardless of the truth. That evening, my phone exploded with messages from family members. Grace had been busy, contacting everyone from our second cousins to our parents' bridge club friends, spreading a carefully crafted narrative that painted me as a manipulative granddaughter who had taken advantage of an elderly woman. "We're worried about you, honey," my mother said when she called. "Grace says you're not thinking clearly because of your grief. Maybe you should just let the house be sold and split the money for family peace." This was Grace's strategy. Pressure from all sides, making me the obstacle to family harmony rather than addressing her own greed. "Mom, Grandma wanted me to have the house. She told you that many times over the years," I reminded her. "I know, but is a house worth destroying your relationship with your sister?" The irony was painful. Grace had been undermining our relationship for decades, yet I was the one being asked to sacrifice to preserve a peace that had never existed. The campaign extended beyond our family. At a judicial conference the following week, a colleague mentioned that he'd run into Derek at a bar association event. "He was telling some concerning stories about your grandmother's estate," he said carefully. "I thought you should know." He implied there might be financial improprieties involved. Derek was using his legal connections to damage my professional reputation. This wasn't just about the inheritance anymore, it was about destroying me completely. Meanwhile, items continued disappearing from Evelyn's house. Despite the security system, I arrived one weekend to find the china cabinet emptied of our grandmother's antique Wedgwood collection. The security footage showed Grace entering with her own key, one I didn't know she had, and methodically packing everything into boxes while talking on her phone. When I confronted her at her home, Derek answered the door. "This is harassment," he said immediately. "We have witnesses who saw those china pieces at our house months ago. Evelyn gave them to Grace last Christmas." "That's a lie," I replied. "Grandma used that china when I had dinner with her 2 weeks before she died." Grace appeared behind Derek, her eyes red as if she'd been crying. "Why are you doing this to me, Samantha? First you turned Grandma against me, and now you're making up stories about theft? Those were my dishes. Grandma promised them to me years ago." As she spoke, I noticed one of Evelyn's crystal vases prominently displayed on their entryway table. It had been in our grandmother's family for generations. "What about that vase?" I asked, pointing to it. "Did she promise you that too?" Grace burst into tears. "See how she attacks me? It's always been like this. Samantha, the perfect one, making me feel worthless. I'm just trying to preserve a few family memories, and she treats me like a criminal." It was a masterful performance. If I had known better, I might have believed her myself. Derek put his arm around Grace protectively, glaring at me. "I think you should leave now," he said. "And be advised that if you continue making these false accusations, we'll add defamation to our lawsuit." As I turned to go, I noticed a stack of mail on their side table. On top was a letter from a casino resort with final notice, stamped across the envelope. Another piece showed the corner of a foreclosure warning. Grace quickly shuffled the papers out of sight, but not before I understood the desperation driving their actions. Their financial situation was even worse than I'd suspected. Further investigation through public records revealed they had taken out a third mortgage on their home just months earlier. Derek's law firm was underperforming, with several clients having filed complaints with the Bar Association. Grace's interior design business existed mainly on social media. She had few actual clients. The most disturbing discovery came from Maria, Evelyn's caregiver. She found a hidden camera in Evelyn's bedroom when packing up her belongings, a camera Grace had installed during a visit, presumably to monitor Evelyn's conversations with her attorney or me. "Your grandmother found it herself," Maria told me. "She was sharper than anyone gave her credit for. She didn't confront your sister, but she did tell Mr. Harrington about it. That's why they met at his office for the final will signing, not at the house." The depth of Grace's betrayal was staggering. She hadn't just tried to manipulate our grandmother's will, she had invaded her privacy during her final months. The revelation made me physically ill. Amid this turmoil came an administrative notice that I initially overlooked. As a municipal court judge, I rotated through different divisions. According to the schedule, I would be handling probate court cases during the upcoming 2-week period. The exact time frame when Evelyn's will contest was scheduled for its initial hearing. Ethical considerations immediately flooded my mind. While I wouldn't be assigned my own family's case, my position created a potential conflict of interest that I needed to address. More importantly, this scheduling coincidence offered an unexpected opportunity. Grace and Derek had no idea about my current judicial assignment. They knew I worked at the courthouse but had never bothered to understand my role there. Their assumption that I was just doing administrative work was about to collide with reality in a way I could never have planned. The question was, how should I handle this unexpected twist of fate? If you've ever been underestimated by family, you know that feeling when they're about to learn the truth about who you really are. It's not about revenge. It's about justice and standing in your truth. I had some serious decisions to make about how to handle this ethical situation while protecting my grandmother's wishes. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had to choose between family peace and standing up for what's right. Now, let me tell you what happened next. The ethical dilemma kept me awake that night. As a judge, I held myself to the highest standards of professional conduct. The coincidence of Evelyn's case landing in probate court during my rotation wasn't something I could ignore or exploit. Yet Grace and Derek's relentless attacks had pushed me into a corner. The next morning, I requested an urgent meeting with Judge Patricia Wilson, my mentor since law school and the senior judge who had supervised my judicial appointment. At 72, Patricia had seen everything in her decades on the bench. Her office walls were covered with photos of 3 generations of her family alongside legal commendations and diplomas. "This is quite the situation you're in," she said after I explained everything, professionally and personally. "I know I need to recuse myself from any involvement with the case," I said, "but I'm concerned about how to handle this ethically while also protecting myself and Grandma's wishes." Patricia removed her reading glasses and studied me carefully. "The first thing we need to do is ensure there's no appearance of impropriety. You're right to recuse yourself from any involvement with the probate cases during this period. I'll arrange for Judge Thomas to handle all probate matters for those 2 weeks." Raymond Thomas was a retired judge who occasionally returned to help with overloaded dockets. He was known for his fairness and by-the-book approach. "The second issue," Patricia continued, "is your personal involvement as a beneficiary. You need proper legal representation separate from your position as a judge. Derek has been telling people I'm using my court connections to influence the case," I admitted. Patricia's expression hardened. "That's a serious allegation against a sitting judge. Has he made this claim formally?" "Not in writing, just verbally to colleagues." "That's still potentially an ethics violation on his part," she noted. "Document everything, Samantha. Every communication, every missing item, every statement they make about you." Following Patricia's advice, I temporarily stepped back from my judicial duties for the specific 2-week period and requested administrative leave. This would remove any possible conflict while allowing me to focus on the case as Evelyn's beneficiary. For my legal representation, Patricia recommended Michael Brennan, a former district attorney who specialized in estate litigation and elder law. At our first meeting, I brought copies of Evelyn's will, the security footage from her house, and the documentation of items Grace had already taken. "Your sister and her husband have made a critical error," Michael said after reviewing everything. They've built their case on claims that are easily disprovable. We can demonstrate that your grandmother was mentally competent, that you didn't isolate her, and that they're the ones who attempted undue influence. Michael's strategy was comprehensive. Rather than just defending against their accusations, we would counterfile with evidence of Grace and Derek's behavior. We'll depose Maria and the other caregivers. We'll get medical records confirming your grandmother's mental clarity. And we'll document the pattern of items disappearing from the house, he explained. But most importantly, we need to understand their financial situation better. That's their motivation, and it's likely worse than what you've uncovered so far. Through legal channels, Michael obtained records showing that Derek's law practice had been sued twice for malpractice, with settlements that had drained their savings. Grace had maxed out multiple credit cards funding her lifestyle blog and social media presence. Most damning, they had a combined gambling debt of over $200,000 at 3 different casinos. They're desperate, Michael concluded. This inheritance isn't just something they want, it's something they need to avoid bankruptcy. Our investigation also revealed a pattern that went beyond Evelyn. Derek's parents had modified their will 2 years earlier, removing him as executor and trustee after discovering unauthorized withdrawals from their accounts. They had kept this private to avoid embarrassing him, but court records told the story clearly. The most powerful evidence came unexpectedly. While helping clear out Evelyn's office, I found a small digital recorder in her desk drawer. It contained audio diary entries she had made during the last year of her life, a project suggested by her doctor to help process her thoughts as her health declined. Grace visited today, Evelyn's voice said in an entry from 3 months before her death. The first time in over a year without Richard and Eleanor. She brought papers she wanted me to sign. Something about making her executor and simplifying the estate process. When I said I wanted to read them carefully first, she became upset. Said I obviously didn't trust her.
The truth is, I don't.
Not with this. She's never shown interest in the house or my collection before. It's Samantha who loves these things, who understands their value beyond money. I won't be pressured, not even by family.
Especially not by family.
Other entries detailed Grace's repeated calls trying to change Evelyn's mind, her complaints about me to other family members, and Evelyn's clear reasoning for her estate decisions. The recordings would be devastating to Grace, and Derek's claims that Evelyn had been mentally compromised or unduly influenced. As the court date approached, I struggled with balancing professional ethics and personal hurt. The case would be heard by Judge Thomas, with no involvement from me in my judicial capacity. Still, Derek and Grace didn't know about my recusal or that I had taken leave during this period. They still believed I was just doing administrative work at the courthouse. Michael advised me to keep my judicial position quiet from Grace and Derek until the hearing. It's not about surprising them, he explained. It's about preventing them from creating new allegations about your using your position improperly. Once they see you're handling this ethically by having a different judge hear the case, it undermines their narrative about you. The night before the hearing, Grace called me. Unlike her previous communications, which had been through Derek or attorneys, she reached out directly. It's not too late to settle this, she said, her voice uncharacteristically tense. We can still work something out as sisters. I'm open to discussion, I replied carefully. What are you proposing? Drop the contest over Grandma's will. Let us sell the house and split everything 4 ways like it should have been originally. In return, we'll stop the legal proceedings and keep family matters private. The threat was clear. Proceed with defending Evelyn's will, and they would continue attacking my professional reputation. Grace, I'm honoring Grandma's wishes. That's all I've ever wanted to do. You always think you're so much better than everyone else, she snapped, her conciliatory tone vanishing. So perfect. So ethical. You have no idea what's coming tomorrow. Derek has evidence that will destroy you in court and in your precious career. The call ended with her warning. Last chance, Samantha. Back down now, or regret it forever. I didn't sleep that night, wondering what evidence they might have manufactured. By morning, I was exhausted but resolved. Whatever happened in court, I would face it with the same integrity Evelyn had taught me to value above all else. The county courthouse was already busy when I arrived at 8:30 the next morning. Unlike my usual routine of entering through the judicial chambers, I came through the main entrance and sat in the public gallery of Courtroom 3, dressed in a simple navy blue suit rather than judicial robes. Few people in the waiting area recognized me outside my usual context, which was exactly what I wanted. At 5 minutes to 9, Grace and Derek made their entrance. Grace wore an expensive black dress that seemed calculated to project the image of a grieving granddaughter, while Derek carried a leather briefcase embossed with his initials in gold. They were accompanied by 2 associates from Derek's firm, creating the impression of a formidable legal team. They didn't notice me sitting quietly in the back row. Instead, they arranged their materials at the plaintiff's table with theatrical confidence, Derek whispering instructions to his associates while Grace nodded gravely. Our parents slipped in moments later, looking uncomfortable as they took seats in the middle of the room, deliberately positioning themselves as neutral parties. At precisely 9 o'clock, the bailiff called for attention. All rise. The Court of Common Pleas, Probate Division, is now in session, the Honorable Judge presiding. Everyone stood as expected, but no judge entered immediately. Derek used this moment to address the gathering, speaking just loudly enough for everyone to hear. Before we begin, I want to thank everyone for coming to support us in this difficult matter. As you know, we're simply trying to ensure that our grandmother's true wishes are honored, not the manipulated documents created under duress. Grace nodded, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. It breaks my heart that it's come to this, but Samantha has left us no choice. The bailiff cleared his throat disapprovingly, but Derek continued. We have evidence that will conclusively prove undue influence and testamentary incapacity. We intend to demonstrate that Samantha Adams systemically isolated our grandmother, manipulated her during a vulnerable period, and orchestrated this fraudulent will to disinherit legitimate heirs. He turned slightly, finally noticing me in the back row. A flicker of confusion crossed his face, quickly replaced by a smug smile. In fact, he continued more loudly, the defendant herself appears to have finally decided to join us. Perhaps she realized the futility of her position. Grace turned to look at me, her expression a practiced mask of sorrow.
Oh, Samantha.
Even now, you can't do the right thing. You've always been so selfish, so focused on yourself. I tried to protect you from this public humiliation, but you wouldn't listen. Before I could respond, she addressed the courtroom directly. My sister has always been the family disappointment. Behind the quiet facade, she's manipulative and greedy. She works at the courthouse pushing papers and thinks that makes her important. The truth is, she's worthless in terms of actual legal knowledge or ethics. She couldn't even get a real job at a law firm like Derek. The bailiff stepped forward. Ma'am, please save your statements for the official proceedings. Grace ignored him. Everyone needs to know what kind of person tries to steal from her own family. Samantha has been jealous of me her entire life, and this is her pathetic attempt to finally get something I should have. She's always been worthless, and now everyone will see it. The bailiff moved toward the judge's chambers. His honor is ready now. All rise for the Honorable Judge Raymond Thomas, he announced. As everyone stood again, I quietly made my way to the front of the courtroom. Grace was still whispering furiously to Derek, neither of them paying attention as I walked past the gallery railing. Judge Thomas, a distinguished man in his late 60s with silver hair and stern features, entered from his chambers. Good morning, everyone, he said. Good morning, Your Honor. I responded clearly, now standing beside the bailiff rather than taking a seat at the defendant's table. Grace's head snapped up at the sound of my voice coming from the wrong direction. Her eyes widened as she took in my position near the bench. Derek's confident expression faltered, confusion evident as he looked between me and Judge Thomas. Before we begin today's proceedings, Judge Thomas said, I want to address an administrative matter. Judge Samantha Adams, who would normally be assigned to this division during this period, has appropriately recused herself due to her personal involvement in this case as a beneficiary of the estate in question. I will be presiding over all probate matters for the next 2 weeks to ensure there is no conflict of interest. The courtroom fell silent as the implications became clear. Grace's face strained of color. Derek dropped his pen, fumbling as he tried to recover it. Judge Adams has taken administrative leave during this period and will be represented by counsel as a private citizen in these proceedings, Judge Thomas continued. This separation of her judicial role from her personal involvement demonstrates the ethical standards the court upholds. He looked directly at Derek. Mr. Williamson, as an officer of the court yourself, I trust you appreciate the propriety of these arrangements. Derek stood, his composure visibly shaken. Your Honor, this is unexpected. We were unaware of Ms. Adams' position. This raises serious questions about potential impropriety and influence. Judge Thomas cut him off. Mr. Williamson, are you suggesting that the court's administrative procedures are inadequate? Or that I would be improperly influenced in my duties? No, Your Honor, of course not, Derek backpedaled. But the circumstances are that Judge Adams has followed proper ethical guidelines by recusing herself completely from this matter in her professional capacity, Judge Thomas stated firmly. She is here today as a private citizen and beneficiary, nothing more. Now, shall we proceed with the actual matter before the court, or do you wish to continue questioning the court's integrity? Derek sat down heavily, leaning over to whisper urgently to Grace, whose shock had transformed into barely contained fury. Their carefully constructed narrative was crumbling before the proceedings had even formally begun. Michael Brennan, who had been observing quietly, now approached the defendant's table. Michael Brennan representing Samantha Adams, Your Honor. We're prepared to proceed. Judge Thomas nodded. Very well, Mr. Williamson, you may present your challenge to the will of Evelyn Morgan. Derek stood again, attempting to recover his earlier confidence. Your Honor, we contend that the will dated 3 months prior to Evelyn Morgan's death was executed under undue influence and at a time when Mrs. Morgan lacked testamentary capacity. As Derek outlined their case, I noticed Grace frantically texting beneath the table, presumably reaching out to family members or friends who had been enlisted in their campaign against me. The courtroom dynamics had shifted dramatically in the space of 5 minutes, and they were scrambling to adjust their strategy. The first witnesses Derek called were distant relatives who testified about how close Grace had been to our grandmother and how I had supposedly limited their access to Evelyn in her final months. Under cross-examination by Michael, each was forced to admit they had rarely visited Evelyn before her illness and knew little about her daily care or wishes. When was the last time you visited Mrs. Morgan before her death? Michael asked our second cousin Robert. Well, it was probably last Christmas, he admitted reluctantly. And before that, maybe the previous Christmas? We exchanged cards regularly, though. So your testimony about Samantha limiting access is based on what, exactly? Grace told us Samantha had taken over everything and wasn't allowing visitors without her approval. This pattern repeated with each of Derek's witnesses. Their testimonies fell apart under scrutiny, revealing that most of their information came directly from Grace rather than first-hand knowledge. By the lunch recess, the initial confidence of Grace and Derek's team had evaporated. I overheard Derek hissing at Grace in the hallway. Why didn't you tell me she was a judge? Do you have any idea how this looks? How was I supposed to know? Grace snapped back. She never talks about her work. Everyone just said she had some job at the courthouse. Their afternoon strategy shifted dramatically. Instead of attacking my character directly, Derek attempted to focus on technical aspects of the will's execution. This approach faltered when Judge Thomas admitted Evelyn's recorded audio diary into evidence over Derek's strenuous objections. The courtroom fell silent as Evelyn's clear, firm voice filled the room. I'm making these changes to my will with full understanding of what I'm doing. Samantha has never asked me for anything. In fact, she tried to talk me out of leaving her the house, saying it should be divided equally. That's exactly why she deserves it. She's the only one who values it beyond its monetary worth. Another entry was even more damaging to Grace and Derek's case. Grace and that husband of hers came by again today. More pressure to change my will. Derek actually suggested I might be developing dementia when I refused to sign their papers. Imagine using that against your own mother-in-law. I may be old, but I know manipulation when I see it. With each recording, Grace seemed to physically shrink in her seat. By late afternoon, when Maria testified about finding the hidden camera and Grace's infrequent visits, Derek was frantically passing notes to his associates, likely seeking any strategy to salvage their case. The final blow came from Evelyn's physician, Dr. Lewis, who testified about performing a cognitive assessment the same day Evelyn signed her updated will. Mrs. Morgan scored perfectly on all measures of cognitive function, he stated firmly. She was articulate about her wishes and the reasoning behind them. There was absolutely no evidence of diminished capacity or confusion. As the first day of proceedings ended, Judge Thomas announced we would reconvene the following morning for final testimonies and his ruling. Grace avoided looking at me as she rushed from the courtroom, Derek close behind her with his phone already pressed to his ear. For the first time since Evelyn's death, I felt a weight lifting. Whatever happened tomorrow, the truth about Grace and Derek's motivations had been exposed. More importantly, Evelyn's voice, literally and figuratively, had been heard. She had anticipated their tactics and prepared accordingly, protecting both her wishes and me from their manipulation. Outside the courthouse, my parents waited hesitantly by the steps. We had no idea, my father said, his voice strained. About your judgeship, about Grace and Derek's financial problems, about any of it. Grace always made it sound like you were just doing clerical work, my mother added, her expression a mixture of pride and embarrassment. Why didn't you tell us? I did, Mom. Several times. But Grace always changed the subject, and no one ever asked for details. They exchanged pained looks, finally confronting the family dynamic they had allowed to flourish for decades. We should have paid more attention, Dad admitted. To both of you, but in different ways. As we parted, my mother hugged me tightly. We're proud of you, Samantha. So proud. And I think Evelyn would be too. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt tears threatening. Not from hurt or anger, but from validation. After years of being overshadowed and underestimated, the truth about both Grace and me had finally come to light. Judge Thomas's ruling was comprehensive and left no room for further legal challenges. Evelyn's will was upheld in its entirety, with the house and its contents confirmed as my inheritance. Grace and Derek were ordered to return all items removed from the property within 7 days or face contempt charges. Additionally, Judge Thomas referred the matter to the Bar Association's Ethics Committee regarding Derek's professional conduct throughout the case. The court finds clear and convincing evidence that the plaintiffs attempted to exercise undue influence on the deceased, made false statements to the court, and removed assets that they knew were not legally theirs, Judge Thomas stated. While family disputes are regrettably common in probate matters, the level of deception and manipulation evidenced in this case is extraordinary and troubling. The courtroom was silent as he concluded. This court strongly recommends that the parties seek family counseling to address the underlying issues that have led to this unfortunate situation. Legal victory without reconciliation is hollow indeed. As we left the courthouse, reporters who had gotten wind of the unusual case, a judge being personally involved in a contentious probate battle, approached for comments. Michael fielded most questions professionally, while I simply stated, "Today justice was served, not just for me, but for my grandmother's wishes." Grace and Derek slipped out a side entrance, avoiding the media entirely. I wouldn't see my sister again for nearly 3 months. The professional consequences for Derek were swift and severe. The Bar Association launched a formal investigation into his conduct, focusing not just on the probate case, but on patterns of behavior with other clients. 2 former clients came forward with stories of being pressured to sell assets quickly at below-market rates, with Derek offering connections to buyers who later turned out to be his own shell companies. By summer, Derek had been suspended from practicing law pending the outcome of multiple ethics investigations. His law firm partners, distancing themselves from the scandal, asked him to resign. The financial house of cards he and Grace had built collapsed completely. For our extended family, the case created awkward divisions that only slowly healed. Some relatives who had signed affidavits based on Grace's version of events sent apology cards. Others maintained uncomfortable silence. Thanksgiving invitations became complicated negotiations of who would attend which gathering. Surprisingly, it was our cousin Jennifer who became an unexpected bridge. Having witnessed both sides of the conflict, she organized a small family meeting 2 months after the court case. "This has gone on long enough," she said firmly when several relatives tried to decline. "We're all adults. We can sit in the same room and talk about what happened." That difficult Sunday afternoon at Jennifer's house became the first step toward family healing. Aunt Margaret admitted she'd signed an affidavit without verifying any facts. Uncle Robert acknowledged he'd barely known Evelyn in recent years. My parents expressed regret for enabling Grace's behavior and overlooking my achievements. Grace was notably absent, having declined Jennifer's invitation. Derek, I later learned, had moved out of their home the previous week. The transformation of Evelyn's Victorian house began that summer. Working with a historical preservation society, I converted the first floor into a community legal center focused on elder law and protection services. The elegant parlor where Evelyn had entertained guests became a comfortable consultation room. Her extensive library found new purpose as a resource center for seniors and their families. The Evelyn Morgan Elder Justice Center opened in September, offering free legal consultations, document preparation services, and educational workshops about preventing elder abuse and exploitation. The center became my passion project, a way to honor Evelyn's legacy while creating something meaningful from the painful family conflict. In October, an unexpected email arrived from Grace. "Can we meet? Just us." We arranged to meet at a neutral coffee shop halfway between our homes. Grace arrived first, already seated in a corner table when I walked in. She looked different. The designer clothes and perfect makeup replaced by jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail rather than elaborately styled. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down across from her. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure either," I admitted. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us before Grace spoke again. "Derek and I are divorcing. It's been filed. He's moving to Arizona." "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it despite everything. She shook her head. "Don't be. It should have happened years ago. The gambling, the debts, the lies. I knew about most of it. I just didn't want to admit I'd made another mistake." "Another?" "Third marriage, third divorce," she said with a bitter smile. "Not exactly the perfect life I pretended to have." We talked for nearly 2 hours. For the first time in our adult lives, Grace spoke honestly about her feelings of inadequacy, her perception that our parents valued my achievements over her struggles, and the exhaustion of maintaining her facade of perfection. "I was jealous," she admitted finally. "You made everything look so easy. College, law school, your career. You never seemed to doubt yourself or make mistakes. I felt like I was constantly failing in comparison." "That wasn't reality, Grace. I struggled plenty. Failed plenty. I just didn't broadcast it. I know that now." She hesitated. "The legal center you created at Grandma's house, it's really something. I drove by last week. Saw the sign. You should come visit properly sometime," I offered cautiously. "I'd like that." Our reconciliation was slow and fragile. Trust, once broken, doesn't mend quickly or completely. But in small steps, we began rebuilding some version of a sisterly relationship, different from before, more honest if less close. By Thanksgiving, enough healing had occurred that our parents were able to host a family dinner with both Grace and me present. The conversation was sometimes awkward, sometimes strained, but genuine in a way our previous family gatherings had never been. After dinner, I found Grace alone in the kitchen, arranging cookies on a platter, a scene eerily reminiscent of our last normal conversation before everything fell apart. "Need help?" I asked, reaching for a serving dish. This time, instead of a bitter comment, she smiled slightly.
"Sure.
"Thanks." As we worked side by side, she said quietly, "I saw in the paper that Derek's been referred for criminal charges. Financial elder abuse against his own parents." I nodded. The investigators found a pattern once they started looking.
I should have seen it, she said.
Should have stopped it. We don't always see clearly when we're in the middle of something. She arranged the last cookie precisely. "The center you created, do you need volunteers? I'm not a lawyer, but I could help with administrative stuff. Or design work for the spaces." The offer surprised me. We could always use help. "Are you sure that's something you want to do?" "I need to make amends somehow," she said simply. "Not just to you, to Grandma's memory." The following week, Grace began volunteering at the center 2 afternoons a week. Her interior design skills, previously used primarily for social media content, found genuine purpose in creating welcoming spaces for elderly clients. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, not yet, but it was a beginning. 1 year after Evelyn's death, we held a small ceremony at the center to hang her portrait in the main consultation room. Family members who had been divided by the conflict gathered together, many visiting the center for the first time. "Grandma would have loved this," Jennifer said, looking around at the busy office where seniors were receiving free legal advice, using her home to help others. Grace, standing nearby, nodded. She would have. Samantha understood that about her in a way I never did. Later, as the gathering was winding down, Grace approached me privately. "I've been thinking about what you said in court, about Grandma wanting the house preserved rather than sold for profit. What about it?" "You were right. She loved this old place because of the memories and history it held, not its market value." She hesitated. "I never really understood that until now, seeing what you've created here." In that moment, looking at my sister without the shield of resentment for perhaps the first time in decades, I realized something important. The inheritance Evelyn had truly left wasn't the house or its contents, but the values she had lived by. Integrity, generosity, and the courage to stand in one's truth. "I think we're both still learning what Grandma tried to teach us," I said, "just in different ways." As I watched Grace interact with our family members with a new authenticity, I thought about Judge Thomas's words, "Legal victory without reconciliation is hollow indeed." He had been right. The true resolution wasn't in the courtroom win, but in the painful, honest conversations that followed. And in the choice to rebuild rather than remain divided. When I look back at that day in court when Grace called me worthless, not knowing I was the judge, I don't feel the vindication I once imagined I would. Instead, I feel gratitude for Evelyn's wisdom in anticipating what might happen, for the painful truth that finally broke through decades of family dysfunction, and for the chance to create something meaningful from the conflict. Sometimes justice arrives in unexpected ways. Sometimes the most important judgments aren't made from behind a bench, but in quiet moments of truth between people who share a history. And sometimes, the greatest inheritance isn't what's written in a will, but the courage to live with integrity, even when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult. Family relationships can be the most complicated ones we navigate in life, can't they? I'd love to know if my story resonated with any of your experiences. Have you ever had to choose between keeping family peace and standing up for what's right? Comment below and share your thoughts. If this story helped you in any way or gave you a perspective on family justice, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about navigating complex family dynamics and finding resolution. Thank you for listening to my journey from being called worthless in court to finding worth beyond legal victories. Remember, sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't material possessions, but the strength to stand in your truth with dignity and compassion.